Hello, hello, hello. Good morning. Happy Sunday. I'm really excited to get into some of the things that I want to talk about today. And of course, predictability is not what we're doing here today. I want to start with some inner child cards for anyone here, myself, anyone who is listening to this on replay, some messages from our inner children just right out of the gate, because we are absolutely going to be talking about things that they want and need from us, the ways that we channel them all the time. And I want to hear for anyone who's on the replay, anyone here, myself, anyone who needs to hear this, what their inner child might want them to consider as we go through this conversation this morning. Got one more on the board here. So I want to preface this with, today we're going to be talking about some of our subconscious patterns. We're going to be talking about some of the ways that our subconscious patterns keep us attracted to disempowerment and repulsed by empowerment, attracted to distraction, repulsed by empowerment. That's kind of a little bit of a continuation from what we talked about last week, but I feel that a story continuation is what we have in store for us. So I want to continue expanding on those, like I said. So for anyone here, myself, anyone listening, things that you may want to consider while we're talking about some of these subconscious patterns. First, of course, is that our subconscious is created, developed, and conditioned in childhood. So if you have ever read Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself by Dr. Joe Dispenza, he talks about the brainwave state that we're in from birth through adulthood, right? So for a certain period up until between the ages of 6 and 8, you have to kind of give it an easy way to say this, you have both feet in the realm of the subconscious. It's not until around the age between 6 and 8 that you begin straddling the line between the subconscious and conscious world, which means you're making lots of meaning and having lots of experience before the age of like 6 to 8. And then it's not really until then that you can start putting yourself with one foot into your conscious world and start toying with some of the meaning that you've made. But it's not until around the age of 10 to 12, right, that you really start having both feet in your conscious world, right? If you can think back to childhood, that's probably close to around the age where you stopped playing pretend. It's probably around the age where you started considering what role you had in the world in comparison to other people. Right. And then you start being totally conscious and going, well, how come they have those rules that they get to do that? And I have these rules and I feel like this and I'm suffering like this. And we just we become this kind of like portal where all of these comparisons and, well, these are my rules, but these are their rules. And I don't understand all of those confusions about the fucking rules that we have supposedly agreed to live by the age of like 10 to 12. It's like, that's when, if you think back to like late elementary school, beginning of middle school, that's when people start being kind of mean to one another, especially girls start being really mean to one another. And it's not because we're inherently mean people. It is because we have taken in a shit ton of conditioning and we have taken in a lot of hurt and we have to put that hurt back out somewhere. Right. So we start, after we spend our time being conditioned in the subconscious in our childhood, this inner child then becomes the person who kind of, I think of it like a Russian nesting doll situation, right? Like that's how I like to like kind of visualize it, is like there's a smaller me that's just kind of like living in there. Right. And she becomes for me, she becomes the person, the energy within me through which my conscious present self is channeling her, right? I am this channel for my inner child constantly when I am on autopilot, right? And some of the things that we're going to be discussing today are things that we have had on autopilot, things that we want to take off of autopilot, and things that we have experienced for a long time that are presently manifest in our lives as an obstacle, as a distraction, as something that is, for lack of better phrasing, in our way. So I went ahead and pulled, we have 3 cards here for things that you may want to consider your inner child has offered up for you to consider during this call, during this reading, during this. So we have, right away, set boundaries. Now, if you are someone listening to this on this call and you were raised with good boundaries, please send me a message. I would love to know what that experience was like for you, because the majority of people are not raised with clear boundaries. And then they go on to raise more people who don't have clear boundaries. And then they go on to raise more people who don't have clear boundaries, and on it goes, right? So if you don't have good boundaries as an adult, great. Most of us don't. You can look back in the rearview mirror and go, well, that was my mom's fault. That was my dad's fault, my grandma, whoever, right? But at the end of the day, you're still sitting in the driver's seat. So you can choose boundaries whenever you want. The first card that's come up, we have Fox energy. That is particularly relevant for me right now. And we have the beginning of an eclipse happening. This reminds me a lot of the moon card in the tarot deck, where you've got the 2 I'm thinking of the Modern Witch Tarot card. They literally have fox masks on or wolf masks on, and they're howling at the moon. And while they're howling at the moon, you can see these entities in the water behind them. And it's a reminder that no matter what happens, you're able to face that moment. And boundaries are literally that. No matter what happens, I know how to face the moment if I have boundaries, right? So the first message is take care of yourself today, lovely. Let yourself set boundaries, say no to that which drains you, and create space within your heart for your needs to come first. These are necessary practices for your well-being and are not selfish in any way. Be wary of anyone who might try to shame you for taking care of yourself. Now, a question that I would love to put in your arsenal is, who benefits from me believing that? When thoughts come in that you're like, I should flake on my boundaries. I'm selfish for having boundaries. Other people are telling me I'm selfish for having boundaries. Who benefits from me believing that it's selfish to have boundaries? I'm talking start small, right? Start in your inner circle. Who benefits from me not having boundaries? Okay, now get bigger. Get a little more fucking collective with it. On a societal level, who benefits from me not having boundaries? If any of those people are people you do not want to benefit, if any of those entities, those governing bodies, are people that you do not want to benefit, it is in your best interest to divest from what benefits them immediately, including setting boundaries. So for some of us, our inner children are wanting us to consider our relationship with boundaries during this call. Next, we have find your haven. You are in need of a hideaway, a little piece of magic that is just for you. Remember what it felt like to find a hidden place, one that hummed with its own special kind of energy. Begin to think about where you might connect with this energy as an adult, what it might feel and look like now. Take steps today to create or find this place.
What if that's a universal experience as children, creating our own little spaces,
right,
our own little places?
I think because when you're a kid, and to go back to what I was talking about, in our subconscious world, they say for kids, play is serious. And that's because play is everything that kids are doing. And that's why your summer as a kid feels like it takes up your whole life. And it's the biggest, most expansive thing. And as an adult, you're like, this kind of falls flat. And it's because you are not wide-eyed and in your full subconscious state, right? You're in a state of conscious self, conscious brain, all of that stuff. But as kids, everything is magic. It is easy to find a haven everywhere you go. As a kid, we would go into, when we had family Christmas at my Aunt Marilyn's house. Me and my cousins would go into she had this long walk-in closet. She was like a clothes horse. And she had all of these clothes, and we would go in this long walk-in closet and sit in there. Right? Got to find your haven, because those adults out there are loud. There's a lot of people, a lot of smells, a lot of food, a lot of languages happening outside of that room. And we were just like, I don't know what's going on. So this is our spot, right? The cemetery was another one for me as a kid. I grew up across the street from a cemetery, and I am a longtime creepy kid. Go downstairs. Thanks. A longtime creepy kid, and the cemetery was a place that I found my haven. Going outside and reading was where I found my haven. Sitting in my stuffed animal toy bucket with my legs flopped over the outside and stuffed animals lined behind me with like a pillow with a book, that's a safe haven, right? For some of us, we may have been in our safe haven a little too long. Consider that. If you're really, really turned on by this idea of like reclusing into yourself, ask yourself what's so fucking repulsive about opening yourself up to other people and letting other people in, right? If you're spending all your time alone and you still feel miserable, that's probably not a safe haven to be in. It's probably not a haven that you want to spend time in, right? There's lots of intricacies here. And our final card before we get into this reading is you deserve to be seen. So again, this is inner child message. You deserve to be seen. We each have a desire to be seen, heard, and known. These are natural desires that are crucial to our well-being and the embodiment of our true self. It is nothing to be ashamed of. Give yourself the gift of being seen, heard, and known by yourself and by others who appreciate you, allowing yourself to take up the space you need. Now, for some of us, taking up that space, do I deserve it? Am I allowed to take up that space? Your inner child is asking for space. Giant willow tree. I'm already like romanticizing this. Katie says, we had a giant willow tree in the backyard where I would go hide. It had this perfect little space in the trunk where the branches started that made the most cozy seat. Yes. Yes. I love that. I love that. So while we get into this call today, while we get into this reading and this chat, keep in mind anything that resonated for you or anything your own inner child supplied while you were listening or thinking about these things. Don't dismiss anything as irrelevant today. So our card for today, as I mentioned, if you've seen my story, I posted from the Sagittarian Mind about not sleeping on Mars in your birth chart. Now, I'm Mars in Virgo. My apologies to all people I've ever been in conflict with, but my Mars is in Virgo. And I really, really love the idea of working with Mars during this eclipse window, right? So any of you who are journalers, anything like that, if you go back to 11/22/22 in your journal, in your diary, in your camera roll, in your mind labyrinth, whatever you want to do, we just had our final eclipse marking the last 6 months of what began around that time. Now, for us, we started the first podcast then. And now we have our final form child getting ready to be launched into the world literally today, after this call on live. And yeah, I just want to say, if you are considering doing something and you're like, wait, it needs to be perfect right now, dismiss that thought entirely, immediately, and begin taking the messiest action you've ever seen in your life, right? If you go back to 11/22/22, you will see that flickers of the next 6 months were already taking place. And this is a reminder that while we may be in the Aries Libra North-South node, which does invoke Mars and Venus, we were just in the Taurus Scorpio North and South node, which invokes Venus and Mars, right? This is the paradox of the lesson, right? We learned the lesson and now we're learning the inverse of the lesson. Isn't it so fun to be a person right now? Isn't it so much fun to be a person incarnated on this earth right now? So, let's get into the card for today. We are having an 11-day, 12/3/2023 is 11 or 2. 11 is where we are at. So take a look at this card. Look at this card. Purity, pursuit. Electricity dances a sexual fire that awakens the certainty of union. The ritual begins, a memory of more than wholeness, a celebration of bringing the flame to the pyre. Now, let's get a little lit lesson here. A pyre is a freaking funeral. You're lighting something on fire and watching it burn with the trust that something more than wholeness is what's on the other side, right? That's a suspension of ego, because according to my ego, I'm full. Something more than what I know is on the other side of what we are pursuing right now. The focus of this card is the sexual electricity of the male-female dance. While we're listening to this, let's not distract ourselves with gender norms and gender roles and man, woman, and instead think about our masculine conscious and subconscious, our feminine conscious and subconscious. Think about our conscious self and our subconscious self. That's where this whole polarity comes back to. And it is only our conscious self that needs to understand through this contrast, right? Our ego is what understands through contrast. So suspend the fixation on this means a man and this means a woman. This is an intricate dance between your own conscious and subconscious energies. The focus of this card is the sexual electricity of the male-female dance. Pan, the nature god of ancient Greece, is pursuing a maiden. She runs, but she also beckons. The feminine leads the dance, showing the masculine where to go. The lightning between them signifies passion and the power that builds between the polarities. In the space between, union is born. We are made up of more space than we are actual matter. Like, let that sink in. You are made up of more nothing than something. Okay, says, in the space between, union is born. In the space between the polarities, between form and formlessness, union is born. The predominant color gold symbolizes purity. The king of metals. Ooh, here we go. I got nails. Gold. The king of metals is also a measurement of wealth and value. The Mayan temple in the background signifies civilization and the beauty of human creation. And in the foreground are volcanic rocks, the building blocks of earth. Pan seems to have just stepped through a gateway, as though he has appeared from another dimension. A butterfly, symbolizing the transformative power of love, flies through the scene on a band of gold. The magenta rose between the maiden's legs is a mirror of the lush beauty of her sex. Will he ever catch her? And if he does, what does that do to the dynamic of creation? We all need desire to fan the flames of our own creativity. Will he ever catch her? And if he does, what does that do to the dynamic of creation? Right? The process rather than the product. We're only entitled to the process. We're not guaranteed anything that comes on the other side of the process. So your processes better be ones you fucking love doing. Purity, pursuit is a card of creativity, passion, and aliveness. It is not so much a card about sexuality, although our sexual expression comes from the same wellspring as our creative expression. I said a few weeks ago, not all sex energy culminates in sex. creative. It's conflicting, right? It's so many other things. Is your world charged and passionate? This has nothing to do with whether you are in a relationship or not, but whether you are having a passionate relationship with yourself. Are you in a state of creative self-expression when you are alone? Purpose, the passionate journey takes us into our beauty as well as our shadow. Can you see how the union of both is necessary in your life? The beauty inspires us and the shadow teaches us. Honor both in a creative expression. Wisdom, take the sexual fire and go deeper. Commit to a sexual expression that feeds rather than drains you. What would that be? I think for ritual today, we're going to navigate our creative capacity and find that haven within, the haven of our creative capacity. Now, if you find your creative capacity is very small and you wish it was much larger, great, you can practice. The way to practice creativity is to practice taking yourself out of your limbic system, out of fight, flight, freeze, to practice regulating yourself as often as possible. And as I've said many weeks and will continue to say, if you are not getting your big three, you're not going to be able to do any of the other things to the maximum efficacy that you could, right? So the big three, you need to have time in nature. 10 minutes of morning sun, 10 minutes of evening sun is a really simple, straightforward place to start. If you're not getting downtime without agenda, you're not getting rest without productivity goals. Simone Grace Soul has a post on rest as detox. I strongly recommend that read. I strongly recommend that read. If rest felt good, everyone would take plenty without being told. Rest is where we confront the belief that we must do in order to deserve. And you deserve to be seen without doing, without earning. So if you're not hitting your big three, here's your sign. And if you are, we've talked about a few options for getting yourself into a consistent relationship with yourself. I've talked about how I use the Chinese body clock to do that. You don't have to use the Chinese body clock to do it. It's just one way that worked for me because I like to be wrangled by someone other than myself. And the clock gives me a schedule that I can submit to without having to invent it myself. For those of us who have control issues, I have some news for you. You don't actually like control as much as you think you do. You are a soft person, and you probably want to submit into structure that you did not make for yourself. So give it a try. Right? We only need to be consistent with ourselves. So whatever it is that you're doing consistently already is what you are grooming yourself to accept. Let me repeat that. What you are already doing consistently is proving to yourself how trustworthy you are or are not to act in your own best interest. Okay, this is not a shaming tactic. This is a moment for like, oh shit, I've got some self-responsibility here. What's some shit that I'm doing consistently that I actually am ready to shift out of? Oh, look, how many other things I've already shifted out of. I guess this one's probably going to be as easy, if not easier than those. And if it's not, guess what? I've got all of that history that shows me I can face this. So we have to hit our big three. But I want to look at our capacity for creativity today. I want to look at our capacity for creativity. So let's take a moment to bring ourselves into a more grounded place. You're already grounded. get a little deeper. If not so much, let's dig in. I need to get some of my energy out before we do that. So if you are feeling like me and you need to do a little bit of moving, my joints are where I hold my energy, and that's on a Hella Capricorn stellium. Capricorn rules your joints. And for me, when I'm feeling staticky, it's more like white noise, right? When I'm feeling staticky, it's like there's static in my joints. Ugh. All right, let's get into it. Start taking some regular breaths. Gently close your eyes if that feels right for you. Drop your tongue from the roof of your mouth. You notice that your shoulders are shrugged up. Do it on purpose. Squeeze them up higher and then release them. Begin deepening your breath. On your exhale, try to let the breath fill the back of your throat as it's exiting your nostrils. With every breath in, begin sinking into your center, wherever your center may be. That's in your stomach, your chest, your forehead, some other place entirely. Begin sinking into your center. Focus on that place. Focus on that place. And if you need help sinking into that center, you can say to yourself, I am in my stomach. I am in my chest. I'm in my third eye, wherever it is that you reside. If you notice your brow is furrowed and you are someone who lives behind your eyes, unfurrow. Draw your shoulders down the side of your body to keep your chest open. Draw your breath all the way up so that your stomach softens. What is my capacity for creativity today? I like to imagine my capacity is like a large cup I can step into. I can see my capacity, feel it. It's like a balloon. Maybe yours is more like a rubber band. With every breath in, as your stomach fills, as your diaphragm and your chest, your lungs fill with air, Find whatever space you have to add to your capacity. Stretch the walls. You want to create more space for your breath in. Relax your pelvic floor as you breathe in, press your pelvic floor down. And as you exhale, let it naturally rise. Notice how much change comes after that subtle shift. Is there anything filling your capacity for creativity that distracts or degrades? Don't pretend it's not in there with you. Acknowledge it. Why am I so attached to this distraction? Is it possible I know getting rid of it would leave me with more space? Is it possible the space, the freedom in this capacity is what I am more afraid of than my creativity itself? Find other people's ideas of your creativity within this capacity. Find all of the iterations of everything you've ever done or made that you look at through someone's lens, someone else's lens. You made for someone else's eyes, someone else's consumption and approval. See if you dare discard that. See if you have the capacity to discard their perspective, even just one person's perspective from your capacity. Keep discarding until you find the limits of your bravery. And then say, I have arrived. This is my capacity for today. And return tomorrow to this place, to this center, to where you reside within yourself, to your own haven. This is not a place to escape your reality. This is a place to come home to it. To be honest with yourself without shame, without judgment. This is your place to fortify and protect and be the keeper of. Again, drawing yourself forward. Bring movement to your hands and your wrists, your toes and your feet. Maybe roll your neck. Whatever feels right for you. Open your eyes. Please feel free to share anything you wish to share with us as we get ready to transition to our reading. While we get ready, I want to talk about degrading your capacity. I like to think of my capacity as something that's elastic, like a balloon, a rubber band, something that can expand and then returns to its own state, sometimes more stretched than it was before. And the degradation lies in stretching and stretching and stretching and stretching and trying to stretch out the time between the release. You degrade the quality of the balloon the more you continue inflating it before you let it deflate, right? Because eventually, once you let it deflate, then it's weaker, right? When we try to make money stretch, we degrade its value. When I try to make hair washes stretch, it degrades the value a little bit, okay? And these things that we try to make last, try to stretch beyond what they actually have the capacity for. They actually have the limit to carry, to burden, to do things. We stretch these things and we degrade their value and we degrade our relationship with them. So if there's anything that you're stretching beyond its capacity, one, you can start with going, maybe I like a little light degradation. Maybe you could stop pretending that you don't like that and find all of the automatic ways your subconscious is supplied your ability to be degraded in your everyday life, right? I'm laughing because it's ridiculously true, right? Once you realize that you actually like the things that you're telling yourself you hate, you like them a lot more than you thought you did, right? Having as evidence of wanting and all of that. Once you can let that reality wash over you and infiltrate your being and doing, it becomes a lot clearer where we act against our own best interests, where we stretch ourselves beyond capacity, despite our conscious mind going, no, 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 I don't want to do that. So I want to talk today about, we were listening to, I'm going to pull up my notes here. We were listening to some Alan Watts this morning. I reference Alan Watts' teachings, his talks a lot here. They're less teachings and more so conversation pieces, but I reference him a lot because his work is deeply important to me. His perspective is one that is, I want you to not need me. I want everyone to not need me. And more so beyond the projection of don't need me, right? Is I want you to need yourself more than you need me. I want you to want to return to yourself more than you need to turn to me for answers. And that's why the number one thing that my clients say is like, you turn me back to myself, and you continue turning me back to myself when it's, even when it's hard, because that self is more important than what I would do, how I would do things. And this is a message that he carries over and over. Today, I want to talk about metabolizing stress. So we've been talking about regulation, nervous system regulation, getting into a regulated state. I'm going to sit back, make myself comfortable in my own house. We've been talking about nervous system regulation. We've been talking about, there we go. Oh, that's why. We've been talking about nervous system regulation the last few weeks. We've been talking about getting yourself into a consistent relationship with yourself. I mentioned consistency at the beginning of this. Whatever it is that you are already consistent with is how you are metabolizing stress. So if those don't seem like they're working, you may want to identify, audit, identify, bring your awareness to it, right? Bring recognition and awareness to the thing, and then shift your relationship with it. Observe the relationship with it. So I'm going to talk about stress and our subconscious patterns. I want to talk about them in terms of our physical body, though. So I want to talk about our subconscious patterns, like a knot, like a muscle knot in, let's say, your back, right? I've got a knot in my shoulder. It's pretty gnarly. My massage therapist has identified it numerous times. He has done his best to help me with it, and there is this knot. Now, when we have a knot in our body, that's where we're holding. If we have numbness in our body, it's frozen. That's how much we're holding. If we hold pain in our body, right? So I've got, let's start with some basics on our body. Your feet control your body. Your feet control your entire body. The position of your toes controls everything up to the shape of your face. It's wild. Please go down that rabbit hole if you want to address like long held patterns of pain, physical pain in your body. So your feet control everything. Your toe positions control everything. Your toes are for stability. Your ankles are for mobility, right? Mobility, stability. Yeah. Our knees are for stability. Our hips are for mobility. Our back is for stability. Our neck is for mobility, right? Literally all the way up, starting with your feet. Okay. So when we have a pain, let's say in our low back, my low back hurts, right? It's not because I have low back issues. It's because I have a foot, ankle, knee, or hip issue, right? And my low back is finally tired of compensating for whatever was happening underneath it, right? So when I talk about metabolizing stress to get to our subconscious patterns, I want you to imagine our subconscious pattern as a pain, right? I've got a knee that is hurting, but I need to be unaware of it. So everything else in my life compensates around it. And inflammation arises in my body as I try to protect what I'm unaware of, protect myself, more importantly, from what I am unaware of, right? So I ignore my knee pain, right? Maybe I just like don't ever notice how bad it hurts. Maybe I ignore my like my standing patterns. I tend to lean. I'm a leaner. So my right knee takes like the burden of that, right? So when we do those things and when we ignore them, I want you to look at this as your subconscious pattern. It is below your conscious awareness, right? So when I say ignore, that's a little active. It's significantly more passive, more subconscious than this. But at the end of the day, I have my back pain. My back pain is the symptom of my knee hurting. The stress is the subconscious expressing itself, right? Because there's a subconscious pattern held, stress creates around it, and it creates this inflammatory response around the pattern. If the pattern is protected by this inflammatory response, if the pattern's this big and everything's getting bigger around it, it becomes a lot harder to get down into the pattern because the stress is so big and protecting the pattern. The stress is actually protecting the pattern. So it's in your best interest to address the pattern around while understanding what the pattern is or what the pattern is that is being protected, right? So if you are someone in your life who can identify a pattern for yourself, if you have someone in your life who can help you identify patterns, right? But like sometimes it's like, but then there seems like there's so many things to do to get to the point of even addressing that. And so you use that as a barrier to entry. You use that to stop yourself. But what you're really doing is using that to prevent yourself from metabolizing that stress. When we show up consistently for ourselves, we are more adequately able to metabolize stress. We are more adequately able to use other tools that help us metabolize stress, right? Because like I said at the beginning, if you're not getting your big three, it's going to be really, really hard to metabolize stress. And let's acknowledge for a minute that there are people in the world that don't have the ability to metabolize stress like this, right? They don't have that ability, but there are very few barriers to entry on getting your big three, getting your time outside, walking outside, going outside, sitting outside, doing something outside, 10 minutes in the morning, 10 minutes in the evening, stopping for 10 minutes to get downtime and close your eyes. Stopping for 10 minutes to rest without your phone in your fucking hand, right? These are simple things that you absolutely have control over, and there is no barrier to entry. We have to do these things in order to let our body metabolize, right? We do not digest our food well unless we are in the rest digest part of our brain, right? The rest digest part of our brain is the part of us that is our like kind of baseline way of being. The limbic system being activated is what is the deviation from that baseline. So when we are constantly accruing more stress without attuning to things that we very much have control over, we are saying, no, I actually want my metabolism to slow down. I want my emotional metabolism to slow down, my stress metabolism to be slow. I want that. And if you can say, I want my ability to process stress to be very minimal, and you can look at yourself while saying that, you're going to laugh at yourself. You are going to laugh at yourself because it's ridiculous, some of the shit that we do and some of the distractions that we're attached to. And it's like, you don't even realize like how attached you are, right? This is not a condemnation of distraction, by the way. I fucking love distractions. I love to dilly-dally. I need dilly-dally time in my life, okay? But when we are ultimately suffering for things that we have control over, I believe we have a responsibility to remove shame and address it, right? When we talk about the nervous system, I want to think of, this was a quote that really stood out to me from the talk we were listening to. It says, all that we are aware of, so this is our conscious self, right? Awareness. All that we are aware of is made up of an extremely complicated arrangement of yes and no. Let's sit with that for a second. The self I know myself to be, it's just a complicated arrangement of yeses and nos, right? We're pretty binary. I said yes to this identity marker. I said no to this one. I said yes to this rule. I said no to this one. I said yes to this. I said no to this. Everything I said no to goes to my subconscious. Everything I said no to goes to my subconscious. Maybe I need to post.
You know what's funny about that too? Our subconscious doesn't know that anybody else exists.
Mm-hmm.
So we're saying no and yes to ourselves.
But it's only yes.
It's
here. Not mom said no. It's Brittany said no.
Yeah.
Ryan said no to Ryan. Brittany said no to Brittany, right?
Yeah.
When we think about our conscious self, I think I need to pull back the call where I talked about, this was during Paradox Play, where I talked about the kind of like old school phone system where you like plug in, pull out to connect, right? That's how I imagine our subconscious. And every time you say no, the subconscious is like, damn, really? Okay, well, we're meant to be in a state of approval. We are meant to be in a state of yes. That way our no actually holds weight. So I'm going to plug it back in and give them another opportunity to say yes and approve of this way of being, this way of thinking, this way of existing.
I was literally writing about that the other day. You know, the thing I've been talking about, like, I've been watching a lot of endurance runners and people like that, training and things. And one of the people that I've been watching, I can't think of his name, but he says, you know, part of his mentality of in doing these big marathons and stuff is like deciding that it's already done. Mm-hmm. And so from that, I was writing yesterday of like, basically the universe wants you to have these things you want, those goals, whatever we want to attain to. And now it's like, just, it's done. I have it. Now go do it.
Now go do it. Yeah. And like the ability to recondition yourself exists, right? Mm-hmm. And it exists when you, to draw back to the card that we talked about, when you can make space. Space is yes. Space is yes. Obstacle is no. Barrier is no. Stop is no. Yes is flow. No is stop. Right? And so when we are constantly putting up stop blocks, right? In our conscious mind, sending shit to our subconscious to later approve of, our nervous system is on freaking overload. I'm imagining like little secretaries in my own inner world right now. Like, plugging stuff up and trying to unplug it and trying to get new stuff in, and the thing's kind of overheating. It's turning into kind of like a SpongeBob scenario in there, and like it's getting a little intense, right? And it's like, I have to start saying fucking yes to myself. And if I don't have the capacity to say yes to more things, to say yes to more experiences, because that's what this comes down to. I approve of this experience and this experience and this experience. If I don't halt my no and find a way to be in capacity with allowing what is to be what is and approving of that fucking reality, I'm going to keep my nervous system in a state of inflammation, in a state of no, which then protects my subconscious patterns. Our subconscious, our nervous system was conditioned in childhood, and the conditioning continued through adulthood, right? But the rules were made in childhood until we bring them into our conscious mind. The same way that you work with a child and you help a kid become the type of adult that they need to be in order to be successful is the same way you're going to help your nervous system. And it is stop saying no to your kids. You can't say no to kids all the time and then expect them to respect a no, because you just find ways to work around the no. You don't find ways to stop doing the no and be with the no. You find ways to work around it. When you say yes to yourself, when you say yes to a kid as often as possible, your no holds weight. And we have to be able to get to a place to do that with ourselves. And we can't do it if we are constantly in a state of inflammation and refusing the things we need to do to metabolize our stress. And it's so basic, it's not even funny. Now, if you are someone on this call or listening to this or whatever, that's like, I have a barrier to entry with food. I can't even eat 3 meals a day. We have to address that. That's called needing to help the person, not needing to help the problem. You're not on a spiritual awakening journey. You're on a need to help my physical vessel journey, because my physical vessel is where I move through my spirituality, right?
What did you say that you can't create from?
You can't create from survival.
Or you can't teach.
You can't
teach a starving man to
yes,
meditate,
you can't teach a starving man to meditate. That is a phrase that I did not make that up by any stretch of the imagination. But the reality is, if I am physically starving, if I am on a nervous system level starving, because all I say is no and I never get a fucking yes, I never get fed, right? I'm not going to be able to find enlightenment, because I said in the meditation I shared, you find enlightenment through the body, through realizing the body is the perfect vessel for bringing enlightenment forth. And it either occurs through the body or not at all, right? Your body is the answer. Your body holds the stories you tell. Your body holds all of the things that contribute to the inflammation. And going into your capacity every day, it doesn't have to be your capacity for creativity, right? But I want to remind you that your creative energy is not just, oh, I'm going to sit down and like make art, right? Art is subjective as hell, okay? Sitting down to, engage in whatever hobby it is, that's art. Sitting down to have a conversation with someone, that's art. Sitting down or standing up, right, to make a meal, right? That's art. How are you showing up to your creativity? Is it with resentment? Is it with, I wish I wasn't doing this, I wish I didn't have to do this? You probably feel that in the rest of your life if you are, right? Being able to metabolize our stress requires that we have boundaries. Boundaries are the no container that holds all of the yeses. Your capacity is determined by your no's. The more no's you have, right? Imagine a box getting smaller and smaller and smaller, crowded with no's. The more no's you have, the less capacity you have. We're not trying to get into a state where we're like, fuck yeah, give me all the terrible troubles in life. I'll never feel bad about them. We're trying to get to a state where the very real possibility that something bad happens. And then we know how to be with that, and we know how to continue being present with it so that it's not compounding old trauma and it's not remaining pervasive in the body where it creates a kind of festering experience for new trauma. Because yes, you can be traumatized as an adult. Yes, you can hold on to those experiences as an adult. But when your body knows how to metabolize them because you've practiced, you're going to be able to move through those things in a way that is not braced, is not holding. Right? Your pelvic floor will tell you a lot about your yes and your no, by the way. So when we talk about boundaries, we talk about being able to say, this is what I am available for. This is what I am not available for. So whatever distraction you might have identified in your creative capacity during that meditation, if for you, for example, a distraction is a belief that you do not deserve to be seen, right? This card. I don't deserve to be seen. Most of the time you're kind of hiding from that actual reality. And I just want to, can we like sidebar together here for a minute? I recently had my shit rocked by a graphic on Instagram that referred to rumination, you know, the thing that you do when you're anxious and you're spiraling on a thought, referred to rumination as an avoidance tactic. Now, as an avoidance strategy girly, I was shook because they positioned this rumination as a way to avoid the feeling. Right? So this belief is the way that, like, holding on to this analytical belief is the way I hold on to and prevent myself from feeling the very real feeling of undeservedness. Because it would take a lot more bravery to breathe into, I don't deserve to be seen. And you'd probably find a lot more laughter on the other side of saying that dumb shit out loud. We're afraid to confront these thoughts that we have. So we hold on to them and we hoard them in here without ever letting our body metabolize them. We don't, do you genuinely believe your body is so fragile that it cannot do that? Because that's the same reason that we developed these same strategies as a child. I believed my parents to be so fucking fragile that I determined that I, as a child, was more responsible and more resilient and could bear more than them. Is that really the message you want to keep sending to yourself? I didn't. So it's in my best interest to say, all right, I have a boundary around how I speak to myself. I don't stay in conversations where people degrade me. And so when I find myself in a conversation where I am degrading myself, I recognize it. I bring my awareness to it. I observe it, right? Instead of it being a story, a real story about me not deserving to be seen and I need to unravel this whole childhood belief. No, I don't need to fucking do that. I don't need to do that. What I need to do is say, isn't it so interesting that I'm going for degrading again? I wonder if it's going to work this time. Let's find out. And I'm going to sit back and I'm going to listen. And I'm going to let my body actually respond to what I'm saying. And I'm going to feel the chaos that it creates. Because when chaos is created inside, I know that there's an incongruence between what my body feels and what I'm saying, what I'm telling myself. And I can let it go a hell of a lot easier if I actually have the boundary for it, if I actually have the capacity to bring my awareness to it, to recognize it from moment to moment, without vigilance, without self-policing, right? We're not becoming police for ourselves. And, oh, isn't it so interesting that I'm going for degradation again? I am one kinky bitch, aren't I? Let's see if it works this time. And play the game with yourself, right? It's on autopilot. Bring it up to the surface and play with it. You're not saying these things. You're not saying, oh yeah, I love degradation, because you really, actually, truly, consciously want to degrade yourself. It's because you found yourself out in a moment of doing something that was out of alignment with who you know yourself to be, and you have met a fuller version of yourself. Something on the other side of the pyre, right? That more whole story of yourself. Alan Watts is another one. What is the book that he talks about? That's not who you are. You're not like that.
What you know, like
his story with his mom.
Oh, that's his autobiography.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alan Watts has an autobiography, and he talks about the story. He was very young, and he goes into the front room, and he's doing something like a kid would. He's being a little mischievous, a little naughty. He's doing something that would get him in trouble. And his mom is like, Alan, that's not like you. And
he
even
would call it rascally.
yes, he was being a rascal, a little rascality. And his mom would be like, Alan, that's not like you. And he was like, even in that moment of being a child, I knew, but I just did it. So it is me. Right?
What he found out, what he like came to realize later in his life was the rest of that thought was his mom saying, "Oh, that's not like you," is actually saying, "That's not like me. That's not what I would want you to do. That's not what I would do. I'm projecting that on you as my child."
No.
That's a no, right?
Yep.
And so we internalize those things as kids, like, "Oh, that's not like me. Okay, I'm not supposed to be that way." But yet I had a natural inkling to do X, Y, and Z. So think back, that is like me. My parent is telling me, again, that's not how I would want you to be. That's not how I would be if I was a child. That's not how I would be because of my societal whatever.
Right.
Now that I'm this age.
And
but
think
again,
about
as children,
the no's that you've received, the compounded no's that you've received in your life up until now. Each one of those is creating a stop. And because it's creating a stop, it's creating inflammation. Again, it is in your best interest to alleviate the emotional or physical, if that's what is resonating for you, stress, so that you can get down into the pattern, because everything that's holding around it is actually fortifying and protecting it. Right? And it's the same way that we do fucking protection magic. So please bear with me for another rant here. But when we're making little salt rings around ourselves, we're actually just keeping ourselves inside. When you're doing protection work, right? And you're saying, I've got a hater and I need to cast protection work, or I've got a weird feeling, I got a spooky feeling and I need to do protection work. Are you doing protection work because you genuinely care about what's inside that protective bubble, or are you doing it because you're so fucking afraid and you have a big ass no for everything that's outside of it? If it is because you have a big ass no for everything outside of it, I encourage you to stop immediately. And I don't mean stop protecting yourself. I mean, stop doing it for the reasons that you're doing it, because the reasons you're doing it are perpetuating your self-isolation, your loneliness, your feelings of being alone, right? That's our masculine spectrum of connection and isolation. And you're just hitting the spectrum button over farther and farther to I'm alone, I'm isolated. And you're calling it fucking magic, and you're calling it something that's really good and helpful and beneficial for you, right? Isn't it so interesting how we can take things that are totally neutral, things that are tools, and use them as weapons against ourselves? I can't tell y'all how many times I've tried to find ways to say weaponize on the internet that does not trigger the algorithm. However, I have not found a way to do that. So I can say it here though. We weaponize otherwise very effective tools against ourselves. I always imagine it like a kid like with a freaking long sword. Okay, like they've got a long sword and they're just like out here, right? That's how we weaponize these things against ourselves. You can learn all of these tactics, even for example, doing any of these your neuro hacks, your mindset hacks, doing those from a place of I need to do them because I am not worthy unless I do them, serves only to deepen the attachment strategy you're employing. How fucked up is that? Right? We have to bring our awareness to our shit. We have to bring our compassion and our grace to our shit. And when we can't, we need to observe ourselves. Isn't it so interesting? I'm saying no to exactly what I need to feel more accepted, more loved, more connected to myself. Isn't it so interesting? I'm saying no. I wonder how long I'm going to say no until I say yes to myself, until I let myself metabolize this. So we're focused on saying yes. So I want to know the things that we need to say yes to. I want to know the things we need to say yes to. Hold please while we collect the cards. These are the things we need to say yes to. Now I want to know the boundary to put in place. Most minimal no to put in place in order to create space for a maximum amount of yes. These are our boundaries. What am I available for? right out of the gate, just in case you forgot the plot for today's episode, get creative. Get creative. Saying yes, creative. I really think this is an interesting card. This card, this is from, in case I haven't mentioned this in other readings, this is the Threads of Fate Oracle deck. This is the Shadow deck, which I guess is appropriately pulled out here. Get creative. The animal messenger on this card is the crow, and it talks about the crow as, it might be the raven. I always get them confused.
Raven.
But it is a reference to their ability to make tools.
Yeah, raven.
Okay, so the raven. The raven is the animal messenger on this card. And it reminds us that we can trash magic together whatever we want. We can get creative and make space for our creativity with the things we already have at our disposal. You don't need to go out and get, you know, this is like, I'm trying to think of a good example here. You can work with what you have. You don't have to go out and get fancy equipment. You don't have to go out and get the most expensive equipment, the best app for doing whatever. You don't need to keep doing any more research. You just need to get crafty with the shit that you got on hand. You are already capable of doing this. You already have all of the tools you need at your disposal, and there is no glory in not using tools that you have at your disposal. There is a card in Postcards from the Liminal Space that says a magician is only as good as their tools. If you've got good tools, but you're using them as weapons, it's worth considering you may not be in a magician era, right? You may be warring against yourself. What story are you actually in right now? Do you know? Getting clear on the story that you're in will help you see where maybe you were using some of those tools that you had at your disposal, but you were putting them together in a way that perpetuated more of that self-violence, right? We also have shadow. We need to have space for our shadow. We need to have space for the shadow. This is how I put this together as a tool, and this is how I put this together as a weapon, right? Be fucking honest with yourself. I like to call it outing myself, and I love to out myself. When I discover a new little subconscious rule, I love to tell all of the players in my game the new rule I just discovered, because I would love for you to know how my weird little mind works, okay? I love doing that. I love saying, I just realized that I do this when this happens. That was a boundary. Boundaries are, I do this when. And you have so many boundaries in place that don't make any fucking sense, right? So just the same as we need boundaries, we need to confront the shadow of the boundary where we have too many boundaries up and it's minimizing our space. So what's the boundary that can go in place here? We have the Empress. We have the Empress. This is the Empress week 2. And I would also say that the Empress was definitely strongly referenced in the numerology 11 card, the polarity and pursuit. And like I said last week, and like I talked about here, the Empress is the only feminine energy card that precedes the masculine. We have High Priestess, then we have the Magician, we have the Magician and then we have the High Priestess, but then we have the Empress following. So it goes mask, femme, mask, right? Now I do have a monologue locked and loaded for another day about those 4 as our conscious and subconscious masculine and feminine, but we will talk about that at another time. So when we look to the Empress as our boundary, right? This is Venus. This is a Venus boundary, to tie back into the eclipse chat that we had at the beginning, right? What boundaries do you already know you need to have in place? And what are the extras, right? For you, the extras perhaps are around the feeling of deservedness, the deservedness to be seen here. The Empress as a boundary is a reminder that she is part of the earth just as much as she is part of the air. right? I think for me, I'm in a period of air boundaries, right? We talked about Libra, the Libra Aries axis, right? I feel as if I'm in an air boundary time where I need to imagine air as the thinnest boundary around the fire that's going. But if I stretch and I reach and I pull more into myself, I can see where I also need the earthy kind of boundaries, right? The consistency. Consistency is where your nervous system is groomed. Again, your nervous system is groomed in consistency. So whatever you are doing consistently is what's grooming your nervous system, right? So being able to get into some of the earthy consistency, you find your balance, you find what works for you. For me, there are some areas of my life that need very regimented structure. I just signed up with a coach, so I have someone else that I can report to, because I can't hold that space for myself while I'm growing this other space. I know those things to be true about myself, right? I took this action to support myself, to give myself this other container. Someone else can make a container for me, right? If that's a friend, if that's getting a coach, if that's whatever that is for you. Finding ways that there is space available without assuming that they're going to say no, right? How often do you want to reach out and then you're like imagining all of the things that the person is going to say, and then you use those to help yourself not connect and get what you want? Isn't it so fucking interesting the ways that we don't let ourselves have what we want? Let's see what else we need some space for. We have the creator coming in. I fucking love this card. I love this card. I love this card. I mean, how can you not? The creator is one of, in this deck, one of the archetypal cards. The creator is an archetype identified, and our creator is both the spark of life at the beginning and the final burst of life at the end, and everywhere in between. The creator is where things go to gestate, and is a reminder that some of these things need safety in order to gestate. Some of the things that you are making need safety. Okay, they need protecting because you care about them. We've got fate. We've got this egg here supporting it. Look at the fucking chainmail around that. You do that because you care about what's inside, not because you're afraid of what's outside. Fuck all of that. All of that's going to be there regardless. But this thing that I'm creating, it needs my energy. It needs my time. It needs my commitment, and it needs me to protect it because I love it. Right? Protection because we love things sometimes means opening ourselves up. Protection because we love things sometimes means opening ourselves up to pain. If you have ever loved something, you have felt pain. And how can something so beautiful create such a contrasting experience? Well, I don't know. That's the whole damn human experience, right? That's why we're here learning to tolerate the paradox of things, to tolerate two truths at once. So we need to make space for protection that protects because it loves. So what is the boundary that goes with this? Fucking Six of Swords again, y'all. Six of Swords again. It's almost like this message isn't going away. Get in the boat. This is a moving on period. You are moving on from some shit, right? You can bail out the boat on the way. But it's worth asking yourself, you know what? When I got to the 3 swords, I thought it felt bad. And I let it get all the way to 6, and I took these damn swords with me. This is the ways that we keep our baggage. We keep our attachment to our baggage in exchange for something new. I think of the Tower here. I fucking love when people avoid the Tower. I love avoiding the Tower. We become like human embodiments of the "this is fine" meme, right? Literally, the Tower is on fire and you're sitting inside avoiding. I love avoidance. I guess we're talking about avoidance. I fucking love avoiding shit. Won't the problem go away if I avoid it? It hasn't worked for me so far, but that hasn't stopped me from trying like over and over and over again in so many different areas of my life, right? The tower, especially when we avoid that, we're avoiding self-protection. And better yet, we're suffering twice. I mean, tell me you've got a commitment to like submission, right? We're avoiding, or we're suffering twice because you're inside avoiding, actively avoiding. Avoidance is an active process. You contribute energy to avoidance. So you are denying your reality, right? Denying your reality, suffering for that denial because the denial creates chaos. And ultimately, we know the tower story. You do fling yourself out of the inferno. So then you've suffered twice because you still had to take the arduous journey. The Six of Swords typically has, you can see some of the smoke back here, but it typically has the tower smoking in the background. Like, you really packed up those swords while you were jumping out of this inferno. And you're like, I need these. I'm committed to my shit. But guess what? You do have swords in the boat with you, and you can cut through that shit at any point. And most of the time, what it needs is some communication. Because if you're not even communicating your values and your boundaries to you, there's no fucking way you can communicate them to anyone else. If I have never communicated to myself that I don't stay in conversations where people belittle me, and then I all of a sudden put up a fucking wall when someone's belittling me in a conversation, I'm like, I don't stay in conversations where people talk to me like that, and I don't need to be in a conversation with you. That's not a fucking boundary. That's a reaction, and I've created deep distance, right? And I now have a story about this person. My boundary came with a story about this person, right? I'm pointing to him because he's the person I talk to besides myself, right? But if I know my boundaries before I get to those situations, you know what? In order for me to have experiences I really enjoy having, I don't stay in conversations where people are yelling at me. I don't stay in conversations where people belittle me. And then I get to that conversation, it's a lot easier for me to go, yeah, I don't really stay in conversations where people belittle me. And I have a big capacity for disappointment because guess what? I've disappointed myself plenty of times by letting people belittle me. So I have capacity to disappoint you by telling you I don't stay in conversations where people belittle me and then removing myself from the conversation, right? And now I don't have a story about this person. I already had the boundary. The person just didn't have the capacity to be inside my boundaries. That's fine. That doesn't mean anything about them, except that maybe they need help. But I don't have to be the person that helps them. I don't have to put myself in front of someone's situation, someone's wrath, someone's anger, right? Because I'm not committed to that story anymore. And this is a practice, by the way. When I use past tense language, please understand it's very active tense, right? There's no such thing as doing these things perfectly. There's only the pursuit and practice of them, just like it talked about in the card. We have one more card face down about what we're creating capacity, what we're keeping space for. More sword energy here. The Weaver. The Weaver is a reminder that you are the weaver of the threads of your fate. When you find yourself deciding what threads to keep and what threads to cut by considering what someone else would do, how someone else would handle this. And these people who have never been where you're trying to go, their values don't align with yours. Here's your reminder. You are that bitch. You are fully capable of deciding for yourself. When you catch yourself out in a moment of thinking, we were just having a conversation the other day about something, and Ryan was telling me about an idea, and he was like, this is so big, and I've been like holding it because it's so big, but I realized it's because like he said, like, I'm thinking about it the way my parents would think about it.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like, and something we've been talking about this week is something that we talked about here. Like, who benefits from me believing that? Who benefits from me thinking that way?
Yeah. And it was just like, in that moment she's talking about, it was like, and you start to think about other moments, and it's like, am I making this decision, or am I even like, not even making the decision yet, but I'm basing my decision, whatever I'm going to decide, right? I'm weighing the options. The things that I'm weighing these options with are things that my parents gave me, or things that society gave me, things like that. And it's like, this isn't actually like my self-thought or my beliefs on what I would do in this situation.
Yeah.
It's like, maybe I would take a bolder approach. And in the context of what she's talking about, this story, it's like, I would take a bolder approach versus what these people would have told me in this situation. Like, oh, you know what? that might be too risky. That might be this, that might be that. And then thinking about it like, okay,
Like,
that's
are
my
they
parents, right?
projecting? Yeah, are they
That's
projecting
from
them?
their perspective and their lives and their past experiences and things like that. It's like, that's something that's been handed to me. I don't have to
Hold it.
hold that anymore. I can make a completely different decision that I would do and start embodying myself. And that's something I'm sure the reason Brittany wanted to talk about these things, again, we talk about these things that we do and we practice in our daily lives and stuff. And it's like coming back to ourselves, being your own teacher and always coming back to yourself and being like, is this me or is this somebody else? Is this something I was handed?
Yeah. The question that I like to do to orient myself to that is, like I said at the beginning, like, who benefits from me thinking like that?
Yeah. And like you said, that the quote that Alan Watts said that kind of sparked all this morning, like reminded us, like bringing you back to yourself. Like, yeah.
And I like that you said, this is just something that was handed to me, right? Like, I don't have to hold it. Like,
Yeah.
Ryan does this thing. He's kind of a troll a little bit. He does this thing where he will walk up to people and just hand them something to see if they take it. And like 100% of the time, except for me.
This is a long form experiment.
Yes, this is a social experiment he's been conducting for a very long time.
I would do it on fire scenes and stuff like that at the fire department, just like hand people.
Like,
but Brittany doesn't do it.
I get off on withholding, number one. So when I know someone's doing something to get a reaction out of me, I am way more likely, and this is on having narcissistic, abusive parents, but I'm like, if you stop laughing, they'll stop doing it. That's literally like my mentality, right?
Well, like she's like, people don't have to take the things that I'm giving them, right?
No one has to take it. He just walks up and is like, here, and most of the time people will like take it and then they're just holding it.
That's an interesting experiment to see. Like she said, most people will just take the thing and then you don't even realize, you're like, wait a minute, what the fuck is this? Why did you give me this? Why am I holding this? This is trash.
Yep.
And I'm like, yeah.
Most of the time, people will just take perspectives that are handed to them and go, oh, this is mine.
Yeah. Especially if they're our parents, right? Because they're supposed to be safe and authoritative figures, and they're supposed to nurture us into this world, right?
We haven't pedestaled them.
Yeah.
And so it's like this, like in life, you do not have to take the shit that's handed to you. You do not have to participate in the social experiment. Please find ways to get off on withholding. Find ways to not like allow yourself to thrive on, oh, that actually that falls outside of this, right? Our no is intended to be effective, right? So I'm only going to place a no with the least restrictive no possible, right? The least restrictive no possible for the creator is just take your shit with you and keep going, right? And bail it out along the way. The least restrictive option here for acknowledging like we actually are not a victim and have all of the tools we need to confront our shadow is the Empress, right? Is getting clear on whether you're in your earthy Empress energy or your airy Empress energy or some combination of both. And then full sending it. So what is it for the weaver? What is the boundary that needs to be in place? The least restrictive boundary to empower the weaver to cut the shit out and realize that they have significantly more autonomy than they thought. The boundary is the star. This is the most hopeful card in the tarot deck. I need you to make your hope a little more durable. I need you to make your hope a little more durable. For the weaver, focusing on the story of perhaps what will people think of me? And deciding for ourselves what we do based on what someone would think or what someone would do. What would my so-and-so do in this situation? What would my best friend do in this situation? I really, admire her courage. What would my mom do in this situation? She's a real good problem solver. Like deciding what threads to cut and what threads to keep because you're focused on that other perspective keeps you fixated on the kind of, and I'm drawn to like the idea of like Narcissus here, right? I'm drawn to this idea that it keeps us in the feedback loop. We get stuck in the feedback loop when we're considering other people's perspectives. But if we stop and look in the mirror and acknowledge ourselves, right? We call it falling in love with our own fucking image. And like, you can think that it's self-indulgent to actually like yourself if that's what you need, if that's what you need to keep yourself disconnected and distant between you and yourself. But I don't feel that way. I don't feel like loving myself is something that is self-centered, is selfish. at least not in the perspective that we typically look at those words. Yes, I am the center. Myself is the center. And because myself is the center, I'm willing to deal with the repercussions that come with being my authentic self, with being myself, my capital S self. Right? Looking at biggest barriers for each of these right now. For get creative and the idea that you have all of the tools you need at your disposal. Someone listening to this is feeling as if their partner who is not growing with them, or who's maybe in their own stage of development, individuation, whatever you want to call it, you're feeling like your partner is the problem. I got news for you, baby. You feel like your partner is the problem. The only person who is staying with your partner is you. Okay. If you feel your partner is not growing and you have grown, you have options. I cannot tell you the significant amount of crises in my inbox right now related to partnerships. Again, we're in the Aries Libra axis, okay? And the majority of the time I keep returning to, well, you have other options. You have other options. So if needing to remove yourself from a victim story and see that you actually do have all of the tools you need at your disposal, and you really want to confront the shadows of how you've used those tools, and then you're like, well, fuck, my partner is doing the same thing I do that I'm trying to grow from, and my partner is stuck, and my partner is this, and my partner is this, and my partner is this. I need you to take a hot minute. I need you to stop and take a beat. If you're saying, well, the old me wouldn't have done that, what will people think? The old me, the old me, the old me is your partner. Is your parent your partner? Is your friend your partner? Is your partner your partner? It doesn't matter. Stop and take a beat. Is this person living the life I'm going to live? I want to live. I wish I was living. Do they have the same values as me? By the way, if you're answering no to some of these questions and it's about your partner, do a little deeper dive there. What are the shared values here? Is there perspective one I need to keep, or can I dump that shit out? Does it really serve me to believe my partner is actively working against me? Does it really serve me to have a partner who is? Maybe they are actively working against you. God.
We were talking about partnership, like in this Alan Watts talk and stuff, like when we were listening to this morning, and like in more of like a good way, like sharpening partnerships of like iron sharpens iron, because Alan Watts is very, I talked about him in like in this guru sphere that he's kind of in this like period of time. You know, you've got like Alan Watts and Ram Dass and Krishnamurti, and they're all kind of friends, right? They're all talking, they're colleagues is how Watts talks about it, but they all come to the same place from different places. And they talk about Watts and Ram Dass are friends, and they talk about literally having tea together and stuff, and
having drinks together, sharing beers together. Like, please sign me up.
Like, and Watts is like, you know, telling Ram Dass that he's obsessed with being formless and all this stuff. And like, they're kind of giving each other shit, right? Yeah. But that's the good partnership of like, you know, you're doing your thing, I'm doing my thing, but we're both doing the thing.
Like,
right?
Someone outside of you that can see you and go, you've just recreated the same fucking problem and found a different way to recreate the same problem, right? Like, in that particular example, I love that. Like, Ram Dass is a quote from Ram Dass reflecting on like having beers with him, and Alan Watts is like, you know what your problem is? And he's like, what's my problem? Right? It's fucking Ram Dass. What's my problem? Tell me my problem. And he's like, you're too attached to formlessness. Your form is formlessness, and you're too attached to that form. And it's like, you need people who are going to introduce a paradox of your own bullshit into your life so you can sit and lie awake at night and contemplate that and grow as a person for the next 80 years, right? Because that's what those types of relationships do, is plant seeds in you that are guaranteed to thrive if you have the environment to foster them, right? That's what this is about, is environment. The belief that you don't have control over your environment and the people who have access to your environment is exactly what keeps you stuck using the tool as the weapon. The problem is the solution. Okay. So for those of you who resonated with our Six of Swords creator, you're in the middle of making something and you need to figure out how to protect things because you love them and not because you're afraid of shit that's on the outside of them. If you resonated with that, then what's distracting you is constantly generating new ideas. You are giving yourself the feeling of following through because you're telling everyone about it, or you're thinking all about it and you're continuing to get ideas and ideas and ideas. Protection for the thing because you love it is following through on all that has already been birthed. You got 6 of those swords in the boat with you, okay? All of that has already been birthed, right? So what are you gestating now? How can you get clear on it? How can you be focused on it? Again, the problem is the solution. If you've got too much shit distracting you, you've got the damn sword in your hand. You've got the swords in your boat. You know how to get rid of that stuff. I want some practical action here, though. We have the Wheel of Fortune suggesting that the practical action is only you can make this decision for yourself. Only you can step off the wheel. If you choose to step off at the top, that's your business. If you choose to step off at the bottom, that's your business. But it's going to keep going around and you can get off whenever you want. The things that you view as needing protection because you're afraid of what is outside of them will continue going around and around in that loop. Meet your fears. That's the biggest. I mean, look at this card. This is kind of fucking scary, right? Father Time looking more like death, Grim Reaper. But you have Fate and Wheel of Fortune here sitting in this pile, by the way. So in case you were wondering whether or not this change, this transition, this moving on that you're doing and this protecting because you love instead of because you're afraid, in case you were wondering whether or not that's a big plot point in this season of you, it is.
Come back around.
It's going to continue coming back around. And finally, if you resonated with the Weaver, if you resonated with wanting to shed other people's perspectives on you, and the self-belief that you are capable of doing that, the thing distracting you from it is King of Pentacles reversed. Are you doing this because it fucking means something about you? I'm going to be enlightened. I'm going to be so much better than everybody else. It means something about me, right? It means something about me if I'm enlightened. It means something about me if I did it on my own. That's your fucking help, right? It means something about me. Usually it means I'm alone. Usually it means I'm alone. So my challenge for this combination here, where you need to see your own perspective, is wondering if your perspective that you're trying to see things from are being upheld because you're trying to prove something about yourself. Your spiritual journey, your growth has something to prove. I'm not like my parents. I'm not like my dad. I'm not like my mom. I double dog dare you to go stand in the mirror and find your dad's face. Find your mom's face. Acknowledge that they're there so it can stop sneaking up on you. The more you have awareness and recognition, the more easily you'll be able to observe yourself when you're doing it. The more easily you'll be able to find places where you do it without vigilance. I'm not seeking. Now I just have an awareness, right? Think of it like angel numbers. You start seeing 1111 and then you see 1111 and the next thing you know, you're seeing it everywhere, right? You're going to be able to see this without being vigilant for it. And it starts by acknowledging that those other people's voices are there. And the pursuit that you're on perhaps is because in spite of them. And I want to encourage you, if you're in this place, to not give away your growth to your trauma, right? Again, that serves only to deepen the strategy, the attachment strategy that you're employing, right? While you're doing it. This is the same reason that sex doesn't strengthen connection, sex strengthens attachment. That's why you can have fan-fucking-tastic sex with people who you have a really toxic relationship with, right? Because that relationship gets to thrive in those moments. So when we are on this pursuit, reminding ourselves this pursuit has nothing to prove about me. That's purity and pursuit. This pursuit has nothing to prove about me. I think that's it. Got 9 of Cups here as our theme. You're already on the other side of most of this. You asked for the final cup's worth of work. That 10 of Cups is right there.
It's already done. Go get it.
It's already done. Go get it. That's it for today. Anyone have anything they want to talk about? Anything they want to share? Definitely feel I resonated with being read to shit by this creator fate egg here. Personally, that's very much a moment that I'm in. All right, friends. No one has anything they want to share. I want to remind you that we are hard launching your favorite cult out into the ethers today. I am gonna get off of this call, and after we regroup for a moment and get our wits about us, we are hopping on. So if you want to,
one.
it might be a little long. I'm feeling my momentum right now.
A little long, okay.
Maybe like 12:15 or so, 12:20, about 40 minutes. Yeah, playing up loosey-goosey here. However, we are doing the damn thing. So I will post the link, of course, if you don't make it, but if I see you there, looking forward to it. I'm scared as hell and I'm doing it anyway. So that is all.